you guys this Monday?
Oh, everyone. About 45 and just a bit.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. I wasn't sure too. You know, I'm ready. What was it? They were all black. You know, we'll just focus for a minute.
When I saw the fit and the name, the subject, I'm like, I hold on to that.
Oh, I know. You got this one, right?
It was fits. You got the boom. Ruffy turtle.
Oh. Yes, live stream.
And it's motion activated.
Oh, great.
It's the coolest toy I've ever seen. This is what polio does. And Rotary is main mission.
Yeah.
Stuff's in the aces. They found one. Which is the first win. But it's,
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Florence, serving all of Florence County. I just realized I forgot to get anyone to do the prayer pledge and early test. Do I have a volunteer? Neville will do it. Thank you, Neville.
Please pray for me. Father, we thank you so much that we can come together as Rotarians today. We ask, Father, to bless this fellowship and our desire to end polio. We thank you for the polio day that we can, Father, look forward to celebrating the eradication of polio pretty soon. We ask, Father, to be with our endeavors. We continue to expand our horizons to serve humanity. Through your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, we pray.
Amen. Amen.
Will you say the pledge with me?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First,
Is it the truth?
Second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. May be seated.
Thank you, Neville.
We do have Sergeant at Arms report. All right. Marcus said we should buy everybody $5 for not showing up today and the project's fundraiser. All right. So I think that's a great idea, Marcus, to do that. The Bengals went a big, beautiful win yesterday. All right. It just lifts everybody's spirits. I don't care who you are. I'm telling you. The vibe of the community is different, even if you're not a Bengals fan. It's like all of a sudden people are happy to see you. Exactly. All the sun is gorgeous, 75 degrees. People, your hand slapping people you don't know. It's just a wonderful thing. It's good. We also have the down. I guess you finance guy that's over 30,000 again, or close to it, and it went down. Now it's come back up, and I guess it'll go down again. 31,000. Okay, good. 31,000. 31,000. All right, so I get 32. 31,000. So that's good. And then that's all rebounded, and things are getting better. And we hear inflation's coming, but we don't know that. I've been putting myself a few pounds every day. That's all we got. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you. All right, I want to give you a reminder that today is World Polio Day. Everyone should have a sticker. Jim has the stickers. If you did not receive one, this evening at 7 o'clock, there is a Rotary Zoom about World Polio Day. If you did not get that link, let me know and I can make sure it's sent to you. Don't forget to order your Rotary shirt from Dave Wolfer. New Perceptions is our third quarter community service partner, so don't forget, you can give money via our website or to our foundation. And don't forget to invite friends and colleagues to our meetings. Remember, one of our goals for this year is to grow our club. And then I know, Greg, you have a couple of things to share with the club.
I do. A few years ago, the Covington Club sponsored a group from Russia, a program that's sponsored by Rotary International called Open World. And this group, there were 6 or 7 members. They all had something in common, which was their careers. And they were interested in water management, water purification, and Covington housed them and showed them around for about a week, and they got to see lots of the infrastructure in the Ohio Valley on water control and water purification. There is another group now available from Kazakhstan. Their commonality is that they're all in non-governmental organizations, non-profit organizations. And what they would like to experience in America is seeing how our non-government organizations and charities operate, how they manage themselves, how they go about managing their activities and their fundraising. And they will be here on December 2nd through the 10th. There'll be 7 of them. And just in our club, we can think of a dozen people that would be able to hook them up with a tour of the facility and talking about the mission and their goals and their management. So Tony Zimbrod in Covington reached out and asked me if I would check the temperature of our club and see if we had enough folks interested in sponsoring this group. It would require having 7 bedrooms for 7 days, a way to transport them back and forth to some central location. We'll be able to rent a van for doing the actual tour of Northern Kentucky and the different charities we go to visit. Most of the expenses are paid for by Rotary, except for meals you provide in your home and things like that. So I know that Julie's already stepped up and said she's got a bedroom, and I know that there's some other folks probably that are interested. We got a light crowd today, but if you've got an interest in that, please see me today because I need to get an answer to Tony sometime. Second, I've been a member of this club since 2003, and I've done all the jobs in the club, and I've been an assistant governor, and Gil is now our assistant governor, and for several years now, they've been bugging me to put my hat in the ring to become the district governor of our District 6740. And in a show of poor judgment, I've said yes. Well, it's a process, just like anything in Rotary, and it starts today with a show of support from my club in the form of a resolution, and then in January, early January, there'll be an interview of all the candidates who have been nominated, and one of those will be chosen as the district governor nominee designate, which means you still got a couple of years to back out, I guess. But my term would be the year 25, 26. Now, I'm kind of excited about that. And if you tune in tonight to the World Polio Day Zoom meeting, you're going to learn a lot about this last bump we've had in the road with some polio cases showing up in America and England. It's not as bad as it sounds. And the bottom line is we've still got a pretty good chance of eliminating polio within the next 2 or 3 years. And it might be the year that I'm district governor, which would be really pretty cool. Yeah. So that's how it starts. And I've asked, I've talked to a lot of folks in our club. We've got a lot of past district governors here, and they've all given me their support. And I'm looking forward to the process and to the next couple of years of training and being involved at that level of leadership in Rotary. So thank you. Madam President, I rise to present the following resolution of Florence Rotary Club, District 6740 Nominating Committee for consideration of Rotary and Greg Palmer for the selection of district governor nominee designated for Rotary 2025-2026. Wow.
Do I have a second? There we go. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Good luck, my friend. Thank you very much. I'll see you about those. That's right.
Congratulations, and we will get the paperwork sent in, Greg. So, all right, get this put back in. All right. It is my. Which one?
Gary.
Oh, Gary. Did you want to, where'd Gary go? There you are.
Thank you. I would like to say something. Hey, folks, I won't be here next week because I work at the museum, but we're getting tickets made this week for the concert. We're having 2 concerts this year. It's going to be a little complicated, but we really need your help. We're having one concert at the Lakeside Christian Church the first Monday night of December. That's on the 5th. We're having the second one at the Creation Museum. If you've never been there at Christmas time, it is beautiful. Yeah, people. We have around 3,000 people every night that come there just to see the lights. And our people will be able to walk through the lights to come to the concert. They will be closed that night. They'll be open all day, but they'll close just before our concert starts. Just our people will be coming through those lights, and they'll be able to come inside. We got permission now. There's free parking for our people. Normally $15. Just $40 to get in, free entrance. Now they won't be seeing movies while they're in there. They're going to see our concert. But True Song, the quartet that sings at the Ark, joined by them, they are fantastic. They will be singing with us that night. Ken Ham, the founder, he will be playing piano that night. If you've never heard him play piano, he is fantastic. He'll be playing piano that night, along with our other record groups will be there. It's going to be a wonderful concert. What I'm going to do is something different. On the ticket we're having made, there's going to be a little block about an inch by a half-inch white block. We're going to have a stamp put in there that says second concert. About 400 tickets. At the concert at Lakeside, we're trying to get everybody to come to the first one also. At Lakeside, we're going to give them permission. If we're going to have a stamp, they can take that ticket with them. That will assure them front row seats at the museum. The museum holds about 600, 700 people, and that room is beautiful, the Legacy Hall. But where I'm really concerned, we need your help. I won't be here next week, but I'm going to try to get the tickets here. And we need y'all to take these tickets and pass them out to your friends. Encourage them to come to both concerts. The first one gets them automatically in the other one. And I would tell them if they can't come to the first, if they can't come to the second one, maybe they can give it to a friend that could. But we got to make sure we have people at the first. We owe it to Lakeside. This will be our last time at Lakeside Christian Church. So we owe it to them. They've been so nice to us. Next year it will be at the First Church of Christ in Burlington. And hopefully, if we're good at this Creation Museum, hopefully they'll invite us back next year. We've never been there before. It's an honor to be both places. So we need your help. Please help us. Please make sure we're going to need ushers at both places. We're going to be needing y'all to help like we always have. So since I won't be here next week, I want to make sure y'all do pass it on. And next week, hopefully somebody here will push it. And I'll be here the next 3 weeks in a row. And I'll be pushing it with your permission, Mr. President. Well, I just want to push it hard. So thank you, and looking forward to great concerts, folks. The best news I can tell you, again, I've been turned down. I am not allowed to sing. It should be very, very nice, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And I promise I'll push it for you since you're not here next week.
Thank you.
All right, Marcus, I understand you are introducing our speaker.
Thank you very much. Always gives me a great pleasure to introduce a person who's involved with astronomy. That was my hobby when I was a youngster, and I was so very successful in talking my dad at that time into buying me an 8-inch Astrola telescope that had right ascension, declination, and clock drive. Now, folks, I'm not a kid, so go back when I was a kid. I had a great telescope. Was able to do a lot of telescope. Made on to the National Astronomical Society. In fact, when I was 14, I went out there and taught on spectroscopy, which is a physical science of light and whatnot, to the astronomical side. So I really love astronomy. And so when I came to live here, I became a member of the Cincinnati Observatory, because it's the oldest public, well, she's gonna tell you all about it. It's neat stuff, and astronomy has become now a word for everyone because of the Webb telescope and so many neat things that us former astronomers were trying to explain to people, they just didn't understand what a nebula is a concept. I'm gonna introduce you. Okay. The past, present, future endeavors of the historic Cincinnati Observatory will be the topic presented by the Executive Director, Anna Hank. Anna has made her career in the nonprofit world, working for several notable organizations, including the American Cancer Society, Better Business Bureau Foundation, and Notre Dame Academy. Since 2015, Anna has worked at the Cincinnati Observatory, which is the oldest public observatory in the country, and was promoted to the Executive Director of the Observatory in August 2021. And as a graduate of Cincinnati USA Regional Chamber Sea Change Program, Class 3, and the Northern Kentucky Chamber of Commerce Leadership Northern Kentucky Program. She has served on the boards of Mental Health America, Community Shares of Greater Cincinnati, as well as Xavier University's former Private Interest in Public Good, PIPG, program. She volunteers with the Women's Fund of Greater Cincinnati, the Greater Cincinnati Plan Giving Council, and has served as a volunteer cake baker for our Daily Bread Soup Kitchen and Social Center. She's a graduate from Center College in Danville, Kentucky, and earned her master's in business administration, known as an MBA, from the University Williams College of Business. She lives in Bellevue, Kentucky, with her husband and 3-year-old daughter. It gives me great pleasure as a member of this Rotary Club and as a member of the Observatory to introduce Anna. Anna.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's so nice to be here. I appreciate you all having me. It's been this gorgeous space and letting me join your meeting and tell you a little more about the observatory. So I do have some slides. Thank you so much for getting this together. I like to always start by asking, has anybody been to the Cincinnati Observatory?
Wow.
Okay. How many of you have heard of the Cincinnati Observatory? How many of you wonder what the difference is between us and the Conservatory? All the time. People call them the butterflies and we're like, that's the conservatory. So they're plants, we're plants. So the Cincinnati Observatory, again, thank you, Marcus, for that great welcome. We are 180 years old next year. We are the oldest public observatory in the country. And I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how we were founded and our story, and kind of let you know what's going on with the observatory today and in the future. That's the title there. So thank you so much. So this sober looking gentleman is Ormsby McKnight Mitchell. When Ormsby, he's our founder, when he was 12 years old, I don't know if any of you know any very confident 12-year-olds that maybe think they know everything. Mitchell definitely thought that. He declared himself independent from his family and went ahead and hitchhiked up to West Point, where he became the youngest graduate of West Point. And he lived in, actually born in Union, and he lived in Lebanon, Ohio. That's where his childhood home is. And so Mitchell, knowing a lot about a lot of things, he was very interested in astronomy. He wanted to come back to Cincinnati and to talk more and to share more about astronomy with people in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. And so when he moved back, he started doing talks at what essentially evolved into one of the first programs within the University of Cincinnati. So Ormsby's doing his thing, he's giving talks, they're very popular, he's obviously very knowledgeable, and he decides that this is going so well that he wants to establish basically a public observatory. Observatories at that time, in the early 1800s, 1830s, they were for royalty, they were for academics, they were for rich people. They weren't for everyone to come and experience the universe. And Ormsby really thought that there was an opportunity there for that. So next slide, please, thank you. So he founded the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. This is the very blurry charter for the Cincinnati Astronomical Society, a copy of which hangs in the observatory's lobby. Essentially, a lot of notable families and leaders in Cincinnati supported Ormsby in his goal. And so they founded this group to be able to have kind of a base to begin to build the observatory and to, most importantly, buy the right telescope, which of course did not come cheap. So what Ormsby wanted to do, because he was so committed and so knowledgeable, is he wanted to go to Bavaria in Germany, because everyone knows that Germans make great lenses. If you didn't know that, now you know that. Germans made the best lenses, they made the best telescopes in the world, and he wanted to get the very best of the best. And so he went door to door and essentially knocked on doors and sold shares to the observatory to get people excited. And he raised $9,500, which, I mean, you're talking like, and that's, you know, you could like build a rocket or something. I mean, that's like a lot of money, right, in that time. So he raised the money in, I mean, it was like a little over a month. So, I mean, people were excited about the idea. So he felt, I'm sure, pretty validated in that. And he went to Germany to purchase what is now our pride and joy. And spoiler alert, is now the oldest public telescope still in use in this hemisphere. We call it our Mitchell scope. It's a Merzen-Mahler scope. Merzen-Mahler is the manufacturer. And it's a 12-inch lens with a 16-foot mahogany and brass tube. It's still used today in our Mitchell building on the observatory's campus. And it's really an incredible instrument. It's beautiful and also, of course, incredibly functional. So this was the third largest refractor in the world when Mitchell purchased it. It was actually sent over to the United States, to Louisiana, and it was shipped up the river in pieces and then put together at the observatory once it got to Cincinnati. So of course you need a place to house a beautiful telescope like that. And so Mitchell found a beautiful place on what was called Mount Ida at the time. Does anybody know the story about Mount Ida? You can tell me.
It's now Mount Adams, but I don't know.
You don't know why?
Yeah.
So good you're here today, because I'm going to tell you why. This is great. So, when Mitchell was establishing his observatory, he was so excited, so he went ahead and sent a letter to former President John Quincy Adams. I sort of gave it away there with that, but anyway, he asked him to come to Cincinnati and dedicate the new observatory. He was so excited. He knew that John Adams had a long-had interest in establishing a national observatory when he was president, but wasn't able to do so. So Adams this is 40s at this point. Adams is in his 70s. He lives in Boston, and he agrees to come and dedicate the observatory. As we found out, his family was like, are you insane? You're going to Cincinnati. It's the wild, wild west, essentially, at this point. Are you crazy? You can't do this. It's going to take you forever. It did. And it's going to be a really harrowing journey. It was. But he was so excited that he came to dedicate this gorgeous observatory up on Mount Ida. And the people of Mount Ida were so excited that they then changed the name of the city to Mount Adams. So it's kind of an exciting little thing that the observatory is responsible for, is the name of Mount Adams. And so this building was completed in 1845. And it unfortunately was torn down. I don't know if you're familiar, it exists where now the Monastery Event Center is up on Mount Adams, if you're familiar. It's a beautiful facility. But they did tear down the observatory to build it. We're not bitter about it, it's fine, but that's what happened. So essentially in 1845, we established that the building is finished. We say we're founded in 1843 to give ourselves an extra 2 years. So unfortunately, you know, Cincinnati's a very industrial city, and there was a lot of pollution. And when you have doing astronomy, as I'm sure Marcus knows, and the other astronomers here know, you need really good, clear skies. And so, unfortunately, after not that long, the folks that were on the observatory realized that Mount Adams was actually not a great location for the observatory, and they started looking at moving east of the city, where there really hadn't been a whole lot of development happening. And so, one more slide, please, thank you. So this gentleman, John Kilgore, he was an observatory board member, and he was also the president of Cincinnati Rail, and what becomes Cincinnati Bell as well. So he was very powerful, very wealthy man, and he donated to the observatory 4 acres of land and $10,000. Again, $10,000, a lot of money. And the $10,000 was to basically build the observatory building. So he's got to get a shout out. And if you're familiar with our area where we are, there's Kilgore Elementary, there's Kilgore Street, it's a popular name in this area. So essentially this is what his sort of the space looked like when we were about to move out to, or a rendering, essentially what it looked like when we were about to move out to this unincorporated neighborhood. which because the observatory was moving there, they decided to name it Mount Lookout, because it was perfectly named, of course, for the observatory, for having a telescope and being able to do astronomy. So the names of not only Mount Adams, but Mount Lookout are thanks to the observatory. So we think it's a nice name. And also Observatory Avenue, which frankly I thought for a long time was just a pretty name, was named of course the observatory. It used to be called Hogback Road. So all those fancy people, those fancy houses must be thanking us they're not living on Hogback Road anymore, right? So we moved to Mount Lookout, you know, in that area right near Hyde Park. And of course, our cornerstone had to come with us. This is still in the original building. I'm sorry, our new building from the original building. And supposedly it had like a time capsule in it, the contents of which got lost. We don't know what was in it, but we've lost that part, but we still have the cornerstone. So if you visit the observatory today or have visited the observatory, maybe you saw our cornerstone, which was moved from our original location. These are just some drawings. I think this is interesting. I don't know, has anybody ever heard the name Samuel Hannaford? Popular architect. Yeah. So he was a very famous regional architect. He designed things like City Hall in Cincinnati. He designed a gorgeous music hall. He designed Our Lady of Providence in Newport. He designed the Booth Hospital over in Covington, if you're familiar. He's also done things with River to the Precinct. He designed that gorgeous building. He really was incredibly prolific in Northern Kentucky and Cincinnati. And so he was essentially tasked with building this new observatory. And as I'll explain a little bit later, the University of Cincinnati technically still owns the observatory, so they were the ones that were choosing, along with Cincinnati's leadership, who was going to build the observatory, and they chose Samuel Hannaford. He had done several buildings, but had not yet done music hall or city hall, so we're his first public building in the city, which we're very proud of. So these are just, again, some drawings. Something that Hannaford did that was a little bit surprising was this main building, if you've been to the observatory, it's 2 stories. So you're talking about a very heavy 4,000-pound telescope on a 2nd story. And on our main floor, there's just a giant pier going through the room. So he thought that would give it a little more stature. It would help it to have better views. So you could see things that were lower on the horizon. And so we say he was showing off a little bit, but you can kind of see just I think these are gorgeous, the copies of his renderings, what he was thinking and how he wanted it to look. So he built the observatory in what we call a Greek revival style. I'm not an architect, but I do enjoy this kind of part of our work. And so we're a piece of art or history. So essentially that means that the building is symmetrical, which you can tell, of course. It has this pediment over these pro-style columns. Pro-style just means they're resting, they're supporting a pediment. And we have fluted Doric columns. So those are all little hallmarks of that Greek revival style. We have a beautiful orange brick on our building, which obviously you can't see in the black and white, but, and when he finished, he put what they call at the top a cupola. So you see this sort of cylindrical dome. It's Italian for cheese box. So essentially it was not as we know it today with the dome, but had this flat cheese box that only allowed for limited viewing. But again, you gotta give the guy a break, it was like 1870. So he did a very good job. I just want to point out real quick, this little sort of looks like when you have a New Year's Eve and you count down the ball, it's called a time ball, as you may know. Does anybody know anything about the time ball or a time ball? So the cool thing about the time ball is the observatory used to keep the time for the city. Do you remember when you used to call a number and find out time for us before we all had phones on us? So essentially, the observatory used to provide that time, and this is back again when we were first built in the late 1870s, early 1870s. The time ball would start at the top of the needle there. And when it reached the bottom, that's how all the farmers around knew that it was noon, it was time for lunch. And it helped them to kind of punctuate their day. So even today when you see, New Year's Eve and you're dropping the ball on Ryan Seacrest or whoever does it now, it's essentially the same technology, just sort of in a little bit of a different, it's not celebratory way. Ours is also not a disco ball, just a regular ball. And unfortunately it's removed from the building now, but we have talked about maybe reinstalling it or trying to replicate it because it is really important. In the basement of our buildings is the clock, that kept the time. And so the time ball and that clock were related. So that's just something that's kind of an interesting thing I wanted to share as well. So this is our beautiful Mitchell scope in its new home, essentially, in the Mitchell building. We have some stairs in this building. They were built in that room, obviously, because it's just a steps essentially up to the dome. And then, did I leave it in? Oh yeah, I'll be done in a minute. Yes. So, and then you can go to the next one, please. Thank you. So we also had, we have what now is a classroom. We call it the West Wing. It's just the other side of the building. You saw a little fancy, called the West Wing. But it almost has an occasion. But it used to have what's called a meridian scope inside of it. This is a 3.5-inch Buffenberger scope. If you can go to the next slide, it's a little more. So you can see it here as well, the 5-inch that accompanies it. Essentially, it would just do like sort of like the horizon almost, 180 degrees, be able to view out of this sort of basically a slit in the ceiling. And it was kind of another observatory. Any room that houses a telescope that can view out to the sky is really an observatory. So we have some members that have observatories on their property, they build them, you know, so that was another, and we still have all the pieces for this, but we had to remove it so we could renovate our buildings and have a meeting and classroom space. But I wanted to mention it because it's also an important instrument that was when we were established. These are just some pictures of the interior. It's very, this is a place you'd want to like just sit and read a book, doesn't it? This is our office now. We just swap the books out and we just work there now. But beautiful space where they, you know, we were public, we found it that way and continued that way. But also our directors did research and they contributed, which I'll share a little more about. And so really, you know, the observatory served a couple different functions, the research piece, and then of course this public observatory for all those who are interested. In the early 1900s, you can see we got a bit of a facelift here. We have the dome, which is actually painted silver dome, that was installed, so it basically facilitated better viewing. And a fun fact is inside the dome, there are, well, basically at the time and still, Civil War cannonballs that were basically giant ball bearings, because the dome rotates, it will go all the way around wherever we need to view something. And then you can see right there, we call that the shutter. We tell a lot of like school kids, like, because you know, they have a camera that used to have, has a shutter, and they just like stare at us because they used to have phones. And then we're like, okay, let me just regroup here. Back in the day, cameras weren't something you talked on. They were things you took pictures with, and they had shutters. And so essentially, we can open a thin piece of the roof to be able to view out of, and then again, move the dome. It takes some elbow grease, I'll tell you that, but move the dome all the way around. And this sort of dome shape is a lot more conducive to that. And the cannonball bearings were helpful to ensure that nothing gets stuck. Although we did install this dome as it was and updated with some gears, because when the cannonballs froze, if the cannonballs freeze, the dome freezes, and then you're kind of out of luck. So this gave us just a little more opportunity to do some viewing, which is something we're always looking for. So that is our kind of what we look like now. So again, in the early 1900s, because of how everything was going and the popularity of our programs, the observatory board and the city fathers at the time essentially thought that we should build a second building and then have another telescope. So we purchased, this is purchased domestically in the United States in the Northeast. Alvin Clark is a very popular telescope maker. We actually have several Clark & Sons scopes. This scope is being constructed here. You can see how it's put together. And essentially it's got a 16-inch lens, a 22-foot tube that weighs about 3,000 pounds. So when we purchased this scope, the idea was to put it in the big building and move our Mitchell scope to a new building. So if you can, we'll go forward there, I'll show you. I like to include this because I've never really thought about it before. How the heck do you get a 22-foot tube at 3,000? You have to basically open the shutter and lower it into the dome. And then they built and restructured the pier, we call it the pier, which is what the telescope is mounted on, essentially lowering it in there to make sure that nothing happens to the scope. It doesn't get knocked around, you don't mess with the lens. And in fact, I wanted to mention, if you come to the observatory, you'll notice that the pier the telescope sits on actually is not connected to the floor or the ceiling. And it almost looks like it's a little bit like Chevy work, like what happened there. But the reason it's like that is because if something were to happen, shifting ground, or I guess an earthquake is something possible here, but anything would happen to the structure, it's feasible and even probable in some cases that actually the telescope would be protected. That's like our main goal. It's like making sure the scopes are protected. So that's kind of an interesting design element from Hannaford. And this is what our Clark scope looks like. You would not believe, maybe you would, how difficult it is to get the entire tube in a picture. It's like you're like laying on your back, it's hard. But essentially it is our larger scope. It's not as historic, but it is from 1904, so it's not new. And it is one of these, a scope that's so heavy, and it's essentially this wheel down here. You turn the wheel, and then the tube will move back and forth and be able to kind of, that's how you could kind of figure out what you were looking for in the sky, being able to use your measurements and your calculations to know what you were looking at. And then if you turn the bottom wheel, the scope flips over, and you can have even a wider range of viewing. So it's pretty incredible. So as I mentioned, we have a second building that was built. This is our Mitchell Observatory. It also was built in the Greek Revival style by Samuel Hannaford. Essentially, you can see that it looks very simple. So when it was built in 1904, that's what it looked like. If you could just, thank you so much. This is what it looks like now. We added some wings. There's a classroom space in there and an office as well. And these additions were done in 1912. I also wanted to mention this weird little cone looking thing that was added to the building, essentially ruining the symmetry, not to judge, but it does. And essentially, this is a comet viewing dome. It has a very small 4-inch telescope inside it. It is the only cone-shaped dome that the Antique Telescope Society we work with knows of. I'm sure there's others, but it's weird and weirdly shaped. And it's kind of odd because you'll notice the dome is kind of in the way, actually, but essentially the comets we can't do them now anymore because it's too much light, but you could view out the back and be able to view comets with the telescope. And it is cute, but it sort of, not terribly functional, but very neat, and a nice addition, kind of a fun addition as well. So this is, we don't like to play favorites with our telescopes, but this is kind of our pride and joy. This is the modern day version of the Mitchell scope. You can see it has this little tube right here is called a finder scope. It helps us to kind of narrow down what we're looking for in the night sky. Last week we were trying to find Jupiter. The sky's big, y'all. I mean, it's like, oh my goodness. So the finder scope is really helpful when we're trying to narrow down what we're looking for. The good thing is though, Jupiter like pops right out. You're looking for Saturn, it's like a needle in a haystack situation. But the finder scope, we have historical telescopes. They're not computerized, they're not sophisticated, but they are, incredible instruments that we can still use, which is very fun. So we're fast forwarding a little bit. So we were in the early 1912, around there. This is our director, Paul Hergetz. He was the director from 1943 to 1978, I believe. And essentially, he was very involved in advancing basically astronomical calculations. Now you guys have just probably had lunch and you're kind of like, I'm talking a lot, so I'm not gonna get with you the details of astronomical calculations because you will go right to sleep and I would not be upset about it. But I'll just say that it required a lot of pencil and paper. You were literally trying to log things in the sky where you're seeing things. I mean, they had these little cards. They had people that were called computers that would help to put the calculations together and figure out kind of where you were trying to aim in the night sky. So the fun little story about this is that Paul Herget developed a relationship with Procter & Gamble downtown in the 50s and 60s, more in the 60s. They had computers, not people, but actual computers. As you can see, they took up like a whole room. But he would work with them at night. They would let him go and do his calculations because, again, otherwise you're doing them by hand on this crazy computer. Essentially at the time, again, now they fit in our hand. This is like fitting in a room was good at that time. So shifting a little bit, they came to Paul with a problem. They were inventing a chip that they wanted to put in a canister. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Pringles, that's right. They have this problem, they would ship the canister and people would just end up with a pile of crumbs. You know, when you're shipping, the shape wasn't right. And so Paul Herget, this is the factoid. I could talk forever. Nobody cares about anything except that we invented the shape of the Pringle. That's what I'm okay? The observatory is responsible for the shape of the Pringle. And so he said, why not do what we call a hyperbolic, he calls it a hyperbolic paraboloid. It's a physics shape, essentially, that would ensure that you could stack the chips, send them, and that they wouldn't break. Which, I mean, you talk about problems. You got chips breaking, and P&G needed a solution, right? So we love to share that little factoid because it's sort of this great intersection of science and I guess marketing, I don't know, or snack foods. So we like to tell that story. We actually keep a canister of Pringles in our museum space. And at least once a week, someone's like, someone left their snack on your, and I'm like, no, that's actually a display item. But yeah, so Dr. Herget was responsible for that. I also should probably mention, it might be more important than the Pringles, that Dr. Herget actually worked on a project during World War II where he helped to decode some submarine formulas and codes that were being sent. They just declassified this work. He worked at the Naval Observatory and actually went up there for a couple of years. So I'm not saying it's not important that he helped with World War II. That is important. I just like the Pringles story. It's good. And we're still learning about his work with the submarines and helping to decode some of those messages. So, but also, another, of course, interesting note. So the observatory reached a point in the mid-1900s where essentially, you know, our scopes are old. We weren't buying new scopes. We're not doing the cutting edge research that we were doing as the first public observatory with these incredible instruments in the 1840s and 50s. And so unfortunately, in the later 1970s and early 1980s, the observatory deteriorated quite a bit. Windows were broken out. Apparently there was some bright green paint somewhere. I don't know. There was some vandalism. There was just overgrown. And so there was talk of just bulldozing it. I mean, it's in Hyde Park now, look out, it's valuable property. We have actually 11 acres now total with our 2 buildings. And it was like, there's no use for this anymore. Why don't we just bulldoze it? Which honestly, when I say it, like hurts my heart to even think about it. But I get it. It was just sitting there and we just had not figured out how to continue to offer things to the community when we didn't have that sort of research angle as much. And people were able to see, of course, the stars in different and more advanced ways. So luckily UC, who as I mentioned, owns the observatory, although we operate financially, operationally, and programmatically independent of the university. They stepped in with a group of concerned neighbors and saved the observatory, essentially designating and applying for it to be a National Historic Landmark, which became in 1997 and remains today, of course. And we kind of reinvented ourselves as an educational organization and institution. So we still have older scopes, we still know there's value in teaching people how a scope works, and the history of looking through our Mitchell scope is still something we know has a lot of value, but also how can we, with the onset of STEM education and trying to engage kids in new ways, you know, how can we be able to offer some new and exciting things. So essentially we created what's called our youth outreach program. We go to all different kinds of schools. We invite schools to the observatory. They do things like make nebulas. That's what the previous picture was. And we learned all about nebulas and how they're created. So there's an artistic element if that's kind of their way of learning. We use a salad spinner to create a galaxy. You don't just make salad with them, you can create a galaxy and they can kind of decide how many stars they want. Do they want to have the colors? What colors are they? How far out is their galaxy? And then this is the most popular program. And it is where we let the kids, whether it's ill-advised or not, whatever, remains to be seen. We give them a bottle, we give them some pieces that they can put together a rocket. And I don't mean like a rocket, they just like, oh, this is cool. Then we get this hydraulic pump out. It's totally fine. And then they fill the bottles with as much water or as little water as they think they want to make it see how far their rocket will go. So you just imagine you're sitting at work, wherever you all work, and you hear like, boom, and you're like waiting to hear like crashing glass or something. Luckily that's not happened. Several have landed on the roof. because we do these at the observatory, and then the kids decide how much or how little they want to, as far as making the rocket big versus small. They want to make it aerodynamic, do they want to add wings to it? Should they fill it really full of water or not very full? And these things, they go. I mean, that's pretty impressive. It is also scary because I'm just waiting for one to just come right back to the building. But we have one person that doesn't need to crawl out and get the rockets at the end of the day, because again, inevitably a few end up on the roof. So that's the kind of things that we think have a lot of value to talk to kids about, how we can relate them to science, relate them to astronomy, get them interested, get them excited, and doing more hands-on things. Because even if we do solar viewing, which we do a lot, you know, again, making it something where they can use their creativity is something we really enjoy doing. We also do lots of public programs. We do, this is our scope out event where we have volunteers and those that are involved with the observatory, they bring their scopes out. We have, you know, 4-inch scopes, 22-inch, we have huge different range of scopes, and people come and they talk about the scopes, they look at different things, and it's a really fun event. We do that in September when it's clear. And an important note about the observatory, we have 9 staff people. We've grown our staff a lot in the last few years, but really, as I'm sure you're all involved in organizations, volunteers are really the lifeblood of our organization, because we have, you know, astrophysicists, we have PhD level astronomers that are involved in the observatory, they love the subject, we have amateur astronomers, and so it's great they come out and help us to expand our capacity by offering more programming, by offering a lot of expertise. So for example, Marcus mentioned spectroscopy, we have people that will do talks about things like that are very high level. And then of course we have some more accessible programs for those that are just getting interested. This is another program of ours, it's called Future Galileos. We basically collect applications from all over the tri-state of people that would like to learn how to use a telescope, and we provide them with a telescope. They learn how to use it, and then they do programs all over the city, all over the area, kind of representing the observatory, and it's a great program that we have. So that kind of brings us to the present day at the observatory. Excuse me. Something we did past, we did present, and I just want to talk a little bit about what we have coming up in the future at the observatory. Next year is the 150th anniversary of our main building, actually the beginning of it, the groundbreaking of our building, which we now call the Hervey Building after our former director. So our main building. We'll be introducing a strategic plan in 2023. Of course, like everyone can relate, COVID was a little bit of a tricky time for us, and we were kind of in that mode of like, let's just get through. And now we're able to focus more on the future, which we're really excited about. We're offering a lot of new history programs because that's something where we love to do astronomy, we love to show people the stars, and we'll continue to do that. But we found that people want to hear about how we were founded and our, you know, the history of astronomy or the history that we share to or contribute to the city. And so we like to do that as well. And also, if any of you are involved in any youth-based or educational organizations, the observatory has some grants with some partners. But we offer free programming, outreach. We invite folks to come, kids to come for field trips. We cover the transportation, all the program fees. And if you're interested, I'd be happy to share more about that as well. We're trying to extend into some of the rural counties. We do some Pendleton County programming. We've been to Grant County a little bit as well. Just schools that maybe wouldn't get a chance to come to us because that takes a long time for a field trip. We are now going out to those schools as well, which we're really excited about. And then does anybody know that there's a total solar eclipse coming? Okay, great, awesome. So this is like the Super Bowl wrapped in the Oscars, dipped in I don't even know what for astronomers. Does anybody know when we're 2017 there was a total solar eclipse? Does anybody know? Okay, yeah. So that was a big deal. And this is going to be even better than that one, not to compare, but we are, yes. So just in Dayton, Ohio, if you were willing to travel there for that day, essentially it's on April 8th, I believe it is, yes. Essentially, there's a ribbon of the United States where the sun will be completely obscured, and it's an incredible experience. It's very rare. There won't be another one for another 20 or so years. And so if you just go to Dayton, you're able to see it in totality. Now here you'll see it as well. but don't act like it's the same. If you see an astronomer, just tell them you know the totality is amazing, because they'll let them, it's not the same thing, you have to, whatever, it's just their thing. So I recommend though, if you can go to Dayton or one of the other fun locations, again, a strip of the country that's will experience this, I highly recommend it. And we're spending a lot of next year, you know, kind of getting people ready, giving out eclipse classes, teaching students about how exciting it is, and we're really looking forward to it. And I wanted to share one other thing that's coming up on December 7th. This is going to be a Mars and Moon occultation, which basically just means the moon is going to cover Mars in kind of a super eclipse. I don't know what the difference between an eclipse and a super eclipse, but around 10:20 on December 7th. It's a very, very rare occurrence. So if you think of it, if you remember, I'm gonna go and check that out if it's clear. So it's just something that's neat that's coming up. So I wanted to share that as well. Lastly, I wanted to mention that we have a connection to Northern Kentucky in that our founder, Mitchell, the city of Fort Mitchell is named for him. His name only has one L. They added a second L. We're not mad, it's fine, they just did, and I have to share a little personal thing. It's kind of funny because my cousin Jude is the mayor of Fort Mitchell, so now it's like all we talk about when we see each other things is Ormsby and astronomy, so it's kind of fun though, and so they really are getting back to their roots as that being their founder. They're opening up a new astronomical park, I believe, in the spring. They're really excited about that, so lots of connections with both Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky and the Observatory. I, of course, want to take some questions, but I just wanted to let you know, if you'd like to learn more about what we do, please go to our website. It's just cincinnatiobservatory.org. We have a Facebook where we post a lot of our programs. And we also talk about astronomical happenings, so that occultation, we'll be talking a lot about that. And we have an Instagram, which is mostly just cool pictures of the sky and all of that. We, of course, have an email list, and on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, we do a tour. So imagine this information, but with actual like visuals, which is not just a PowerPoint, but you're there at the observatory and you can see some things, which is neat as well. So would love to have you out for that if you would like. And lastly, as I am the executive director and not an astronomer, does anybody have any softball, non-technical questions you want to lob up here at me? I'm happy to take those. If they're more technical, I can give you our astronomers. Yes.
I have two questions. So when you're open, are you open in the evening so you can look through the telescope?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. Yes. So as we stay true to our mission to educate, engage, and inspire about astronomy and space science, we're open every Friday for astronomy viewing and a program. That's kind of how we make sure we're open to the public in the evenings. We also do a total interview programs a year all over. So we're open for special events. We'll do what's called Meet a Meteorite Night in early November. We have all different kinds of special events, but every Friday we try to be open. And you can register for that program if you're interested. Members, it's free anytime you want to come, but we're open on those Friday nights for astronomy viewing pretty much every Friday.
One more question, Peter.
Did you say Ormsby was born in Union, Kentucky?
He was born in Union, but then he kind of grew up in Lebanon. That's where his childhood home
Why
is.
is Fort Mitchell? He was born in Union.
I don't know. That's a good point. Where is Union was already named? I don't know. But yeah, it's a good question. Because I don't even know, I mean, that's a good question. I'll put that on my list of things we can look up. I'm gonna ask my cousin, like, why'd you take the individual finding yours? Yeah. So any other questions? I don't know. I don't have time.
You'll take some after we're.
Yeah, I'm here. Absolutely happy to answer questions afterwards. And thank you.
Thank you.
For having me.
The Cincinnati Observatory does a lot of programs for the library. So keep looking in our newsletter, you can see programs for all ages, and they do a wonderful job. Oh, thank you. So I know about the total eclipse coming. When it happened in 2017, when it was all said and done, I vowed I would be retired from the library by that point.
Oh.
The police were involved, it was a whole thing.
Yeah, it was a lot. We had a lot on our side as well. I'm sure it was a lot for that.
So yes, we know all about the one coming up, we still have. All right, next meeting, Monday, Halloween, October 31st. It will be a club assembly and make sure you're here, is a new member pinning ceremony. The last time we pinned new members was January of 2020. So we have a lot of members that we're gonna be pinning. So come and support our new members here. Anyone have anything else for the good of the group? Senator?
I just have a question, Rick. Some of us don't use them, are a little confused. So is this now what we're gonna be meeting unless we hear otherwise?
Yes, most of the time we will be in here. If we're having a large meeting, like we had earlier this month, we will move it to the larger building and we'll let people know. But yes, we will
So
be in this.
unless we hear otherwise, no lunch, sir?
No, there'll be lunch. The only reason we didn't have lunch today was because we knew we would have fewer than 20 members here, and that's our cutoff for lunch with the caterer.
So normally we will have.
Yes, normally we will have.
Because I thought I might, but yes.
Yes,
If I said, let's have lunch at Rotary.
yes, yeah, that will be fine. All right.